activities that get people to engage on a deeper level. And so, I come to that from being a high school teacher for 12 years, being a retired Marine from 20 years. And so that's kind of my background. I've got a couple of master's degrees in leadership, and that's what. And I love working with youth in church business, church ministry. I do a lot of youth work.
Mm, that's awesome. Well, Sherry Miller is our mutual friend, and Sherry is our church secretary. And one day, Sherry said, "There is a gentleman that you have absolutely got to meet." And she wrote his name down on a Post-it note and gave it to me. I put that Post-it note on inside my laptop that I had for probably, I don't know, I'm almost embarrassed how long it was, probably 6 months. But when we went to this conference, I said, "You are exactly who I'm supposed to." He had a booth right next to my booth. And I said, "I'm supposed to meet you." And you know how some people, I'm sure he was thinking, yeah, right. And then I said, "Come over here. I want you to show you this Post-it note that I
And
have."
he opened up
There
that
was his
laptop and
name.
had that sticky with my name on it. I went, "Oh, this is weird."
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm glad you are here joining us this evening as well. And so again, I don't know if we'll have others join us, but if not, and I know Allison, you've got to go. When you go, you just go, and I'm just hopefully this won't be the last opportunity for this, and so we'll just go from there. But as I originally texted everybody, in my message to you guys, it was really that that I felt really broken and really saddened, by the recent events. And I know that's not unusual, but I just wanted to, and there's just so many questions, and as I said, so many emotions. And I remember Joe's original, or one post that he had was that, as a man, we want to fix things, you want to go out and fix it, and so, but how do we fix it? What do we do, and I felt his pain, we're watching it. Are we, do we, if we're going to get off the couch, so what is it that we do when we get off the couch? I mean, what's the right thing to do? What are the right things to do? And so selfishly tonight, I just really want to learn. I call this, I don't like to I like to use words that are, uplifting and positive. I don't just want to say this is a Zoom meeting to talk about whatever. I mean, this is, tonight I want to learn, and I just want to love. I thought this is a learning and a loving opportunity. I mean, we can figure out something else later, but I want my own premises to be broadened. As I said, I want to move towards this crisis of dilemma and some of my thoughts. I'm hoping that maybe somebody that will listen to this later, like at Dad University, we hope that if one man goes home that day changed, one man makes one change that changes one generation, then everything we did that day was worthwhile. So my prayer is that if one person, if we post this later, here's one thing that one of you say that changes their thinking, that creates a crisis or a dilemma in their premises, that they've held on so tight that maybe there'll be positive change that will affect in a positive way, this situation, and for our country, for our nations, for our people. And so anyway, I don't know if that's to become transformed. So I call this the venue for transformation. And I just got a doctorate in transformation leadership, so I should know a little bit about transformation. And I wish that I had two of my cohorts that were going to be here tonight, and they would add so much to this, and they will next time. And but they would chuckle because one of our authors that we read in an early course that we took his name was Mezirow. And when I started reading that book, I was almost ready to quit the course at the beginning because it was like a foreign language. I go, what is this guy talking about? But he talks about how in adult learning, that transformational learning only takes place, again, when there becomes this crossroads of dilemma, this crisis and dilemma in a person's life that allows them to say, oh my God, there is more than one way to see this, you know. And I've been holding on to this same train of thought or premise my whole life. And then then I hear this or heard that, or I saw this, and I have this dilemma that causes me to take a deeper look. And only then will transformation happen, so I can give it new meaning, so I can attach new meaning to that. So again, I hope that's what happens tonight. You know, through this pandemic, I've been writing some blogs, and the question I've been asking some of my men that I minister is, through this pandemic, you know, how will I be better? Ask the question, how will each of you be better when this thing is, whatever the over is, you know, whatever the new normal is, whatever, you know. But so likewise, you know, parallel symbolically as well, in the midst of this latest, you know, tragedy, and tonight, I guess, in this situation, this conversation, my goal is when I push that button and say goodbye to you guys, that I hope that I'm better. I hope that there's something that I hear that, you know, that makes me, you know, better. And I do want to share this. I'm going to pop back and forth, and let me see if I can do that. I have gotten better at this. Like all of us, we've got a little practice. So here, if you guys can see that, and I'll pop out, but you know, so here's our venue transformation. Okay, so one thing, really there's two things, but I'm telling you one thing right now. The one thing I'm hoping for is transformation. And believe me, I'm doing a lot of talking right now, but then I'm not. So I'm getting it all out of my system here. So how will I be better? There's a couple things there's a couple scriptures that I want to share with you, you know, that I just think so important, because the second thing besides transformation is that we feel that we encourage, that we are encouraging to one another throughout our time together, and that we encourage each other as we sign off. So in Hebrews, it talks about, you know, to encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today. And as far as I know, today is today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. And the second one is, as he died for us, that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live, I love this, live together with him. That means all of us to live together, not separated, but all of us to live together. Therefore, encourage and build one another up, just as you are already doing by your presence here this evening. So here, I just want, you know, we could, oh my gosh, we could do a marathon. I'm sure if everybody had plenty of time, I'm sure that there would be a marathon on all the aspects of this, this divide, this racial divide, and this that's been amplified recently, that, as we know, is not the beginning, or not anything new, but just a new, brand new focus that has brought it even to greater light. And so here we are. And so I would say, so I'm just curious, you know, why are you on this call tonight? One word. Anybody?
I would say for me, it's growth. And if I can't say anything else, I'll just say growth. I'll just give you the one word like you asked.
My word would be exchange.
Wow.
I would say dialogue.
I would say collaboration, to collaborate with others.
Relationship.
Mine would be understanding.
Understanding. Carlin, what was yours?
Exchange.
Exchange. I knew I missed one. Yeah, that's good. Anybody else? Is that everybody? Well, you know, let's see here. The second question that I had for you guys was, should really start our conversation with keeping all those things in mind. What are those experienced levels of discrimination that either you or your family have experienced? How have you and or your family experienced discrimination?
I'll start. I don't know a lot of you guys, but I do have a younger brother who he is 20 and he's an athlete. And so a lot of times people look at him, you know, he has dreads and he has tattoos. And if you don't know him, a lot of people look at him and think that, you know, he could be bad news or he could be up to no good when really, I mean, he's a star football player. You know, he's on the dean's list. And I think that's one thing that we as a family had to learn to kind of deal with is learning how to navigate how people look at him and not always responding to what people have to say, you know, on social media. With him being a big athlete, a lot of people have a lot to say, you know, just about him, and it's not always positive. And I think, you know, we had to learn to kind of talk to him about, okay, you don't need to post this on social media, or you need to post this, or you have to be careful what you say, or, you know, we had to go about it that way rather than speaking back to other people, because then people would perceive us as bad people as well.
Allison, do you feel like in your experience, because you were a collegiate athlete as well on two different campuses on the far East Coast and then right here in Texas, Allison played volleyball. And did you experience similar, and maybe or maybe just in different ways?
So my experience is a lot different than his because I did go to an HBCU. So a lot of my classmates and the people around me looked like me. So there wasn't, the level of discrimination really wasn't there as far as, you know, him, you know, playing in the SEC, and, you know, people are very opinionated when it comes to sports, and he posts one wrong thing or he walks into a store, you know, people, you know, he's big. People look at him differently and feel differently about, you know, a tall black male with dreads, tattoos, he has a pit bull, you know, it's different. So as his older sister, I always talk to him, you know, about those things and just making sure he understands, you know, people are watching you. You know, you want to go to the NFL one day. You have to be careful. You can't get mad. You know, if someone makes a rude comment on your tweet, you can't respond the way you originally want to respond.
Mm.
You know, I think it's been a learning experience for him. You know, he's gotten frustrated at points. He's wanted to, you know, delete social media, not talk to anybody. But on the other end of that, I always tell him, once again, people are watching you. You know, there's people who look up to you, people who want to be like you, people who want to cheer you on. And so, discrimination comes in different forms, different types, and I think it's just how you educate yourself and the other person.
Mm. I'm sorry, Allison, I don't mean to make this an individual interview session with you, but I did have one other question. When you were on the East Coast versus here back home in the Houston area, was there any difference or distinguish, anything that sticks out based on geographic area?
I will say that people are different. As far as like racism, discrimination, I was at HBCU, so I didn't really experience it. I didn't really go off campus because I didn't need to. So no, the two situations, they were different, the people were different, but I didn't have any crazy experiences, no.
Okay, thanks. Others?
Jeff, I have two, I
Yeah.
guess, experiences that really stick out to me. The first major one with me being a female African-American in leadership, I experienced a lot of things to where I would go for leadership positions. And one of the questions always was, where's a good fit for her? And it becomes a really hard problem when you are, you're well-spoken, you do have your degrees, and I speak Spanish. And so when you apply for those positions and people don't look like you in those communities, they often say that you would not be a good fit for those communities because the people don't look like you. And so I have faced some things that I wish wouldn't have happened, declined for some positions because they weren't quite sure there was going to be a good fit, but was always told, just hang on, we're going to find a fit for you. And I often wondered, well, what does that look like? I'm in a city primarily with the population not being African American and it being Hispanic and Anglo. So I'm looking at all of the campuses that are available and being told, we're not quite sure, we need to find a good fit for you. So are you saying I'm only a good fit for students of color at a particular school? And I'm not a good fit for students not of color at a different school? So in leadership, also, you face the stereotypes of sometimes being perceived as an aggressive female, taking things to heart, not being flexible, and only trying to place you with African American kids. When if you're qualified for a position, you're qualified regardless of your skin color. If I'm qualified, I should be able to be with any type of children if I'm qualified for it. So that was a major experience that I've had in leadership. The second major thing that happened to my family, that was a big thing for my entire family, was we live in a predominantly Anglo neighborhood. Most of my children, they didn't have their first African-American teacher until they were in high school. All of their friends, Anglo, in the neighborhood that we lived in. My son went to Whataburger after a basketball game. I will say he's 6'10", 215 pounds, handsome young man, played basketball in college, did all of those things. He's actually a teacher now, teaching biology, and he's actually coaching. But his senior year of high school, he and some of his friends went to Whataburger, which is the only thing open after a basketball game. He went with some of his friends in our neighborhood to the Whataburger. And I will say his friends were Thomas, Skylar, Jackson. All of his friends wore Anglo. On their way out of the Whataburger, a police officer approached him while he was getting into his car while his white friends were standing outside. And the police officer asked him, "Whose car are you driving?" He said, "Well, it's my car." "Where'd you get it?"
Mm.
"My parents bought it for me." "Your parents can afford this kind of car?" "Yes, sir. I live down the street."
Mm.
"What does your mom do for a living?"
Mm.
About this time, all of his friends are videoing
Mm.
because they pull their phones out because they start getting nervous and don't know what to do.
Mm.
They call me. At this time, my husband had cancer. So they called me so that I could be of assistance. By the time I got there, my son was sitting on the curb at the Whataburger, wondering if he was going to jail
Mm.
for being with his friends at Whataburger. The officer made him so nervous he couldn't remember some of the things that he had been taught to say and do, because of course we had the talk
Right.
with him. He couldn't remember. The officer was asking him, "Well, what branch of service is your dad in?" He was like, "The Navy." "How many years has he been in?" He couldn't remember. He's 18. He's struggling, trying to come up with the answers to the questions. Meanwhile, the other kids are videoing and he has not spoken to anybody else.
Mm.
By the time I get there, from the calls from the other mothers who had called me to tell me to go to the Whataburger 10 minutes from our home, my son was in tears. So were his friends. He told me when I got there that he thought he was going to jail and he didn't even know why. They did not detain him and put him in handcuffs or anything like this. But he's sitting on the curb crying, wanting to know what he did, but afraid to ask what he did because he's not supposed to ask questions. He's supposed to do what he's been told to do from having the talk. And so that is major. It was major for our family. No one in our family will ever forget. My husband felt helpless because he couldn't get out of the bed to go address it as a male. And I had to go and address it as a mom and speak to the officer and speak to Whataburger and speak to all of these things just because my son came out of the Whataburger with his friends and got into a car that his parents could afford to purchase for him. So those are my two big things that have played a major role in our family.
Wow. Angela, before you came to the Houston area, you were in Corpus Christi, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so a different environment, but prior to coming to the Houston area, did you experience some of the similar things earlier in your career, as you mentioned as well, or was that much different?
It was much different. And I've been in education for over 30 years. And so just going through the ranks and learning the systems is very important. That you have to learn how to play the game, which is really hard. You have to learn how to play the game. If you don't play the game right, then you have to sit out basically for it.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else want to contribute to that question?
Can we follow up? I would like to ask Dr. Woodson some more questions.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, I really want to know what else happened. Is there more to that story? I mean, because was anything filed against the officers? I mean, was there any follow through? What happened in the end?
Yes, my family and I and our attorney followed through with that incident. And we did file a report. There was some consequences for that particular officer for stepping outside of his boundaries. He was supposed to have been there providing support for the Whataburger because it was late. And normally what they do is they bring in an officer to monitor because sometimes kids get unruly after a game or things like that. But we did follow up. We filed a complaint, and we did receive an apology letter from the police department in regards to that. But the experience that my son had, he will never, ever, ever forget it. And based upon what's happening right now, it is something that runs through his mind on a regular basis and causes him to be a little more fearful.
See, that's one of the issues I've always, of course, I've got, like I said, I was a Marine for 20 years and I've got a couple of degrees in leadership. And that's always been my issue is where's the accountability when this happens? Because as public as it probably was, his persecution or the abuse that happened to your son, the apology is very quiet and silent. And, you know, why isn't that needs to be blown up bigger to show? And if the leadership of the police department makes sure that people know that in my police force, I hold people accountable, that would go a long way in some of these cases. But yeah, that's usually behind the scenes. And hopefully that won't be the case anymore, that people make their apologies just as public and as big and it gets blown up. The discipline of people when they do wrong, I think that's very important.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point, Garland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to say, Angela, as a parent of 3, had a tough time hearing that story just because I put myself in your shoes and I wonder where I would have been. I hear you sort of like even, at least maybe I'm just thinking of it, but I feel like I hear you even holding back emotion as you share that story.
Yes.
And I guess I just want to admire, I just want to say how much I admire you. I'm hearing it. It's not my kid. I don't know you. I don't know him. And I'm emotional telling and hearing it, let alone having to like say it.
Right.
Part of the reason I'm on this call right now is because I never had to experience any of that. I don't know what it feels like. I don't know what it sounds like. And most importantly, like I said, I don't know what it feels like. What I'm here for is because in some ways, I have to unlearn a lot of things that were either subtly taught to me or not so very subtly taught to me over the years growing up in my family. I work with kids on a daily basis. I'm really, really good at going into a school and speaking a message of connection. And I get kids to come up and I get kids to high five and I get kids to message me at the end of the day. And yet I've never been ever fully confident that I'm actually doing the amount of service that I could be for every student in that building. And so part of the reason that I'm here tonight, for what it's worth, is because I want to grow. I want to selfishly grow as a speaker because I want to be able to connect with more students when I'm in schools. I want to learn more about what the experiences are of the Black and Brown community. I don't have a lot of friends. I don't have a lot of people in my life. I don't hear a lot of stories and I don't know. And I'm here to like humbly come to the table as just somebody who's just trying to learn. But in that, I felt moved enough to like just chime in and just say, as a parent of 3, I can't imagine what that would be like. And I just admire your courage for not only being able to go up and approach the officer, and my guess is probably do everything in a very civil way, not only to then follow through to make sure that there was some justice done as small as it was, but then to be able to talk about it and to keep your emotions together in a professional and, like you said, well-spoken manner. I don't know. It just it speaks to the courage and probably a ton of other values that you just it is who you are. And I just wanted to, I don't know, throw some praise your way and just throw that out there.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. It was a tough situation, and we never ever thought that it would be us, because we lived in a neighborhood where we felt safe, where our kids went to school with a diverse population, and he was the basketball player, the honor roll person, the mentor, all of those things. And he felt safe, but he no longer felt safe in his neighborhood with his friends. And not only was it an experience for him, it was an experience that traumatized his non-Black friends
Yeah.
as well. So it was traumatizing all the way around.
And not to make light of anything, but like you said, it could have been, am I right to say it could have been so much worse? Like this was I'm assuming some people's experience mild with what they have to deal with the police. And even that is still traumatizing.
Right.
So yeah, just, yeah.
Right. And you think you live in an affluent neighborhood to make sure that your kids are provided with all of the things that they need to feel safe.
Yeah.
And yet within the 5-minute store from our home, he didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously the officer felt like, there was something wrong with his presence being there, and that is wrong. Oh my gosh. I mean, so many levels. I was telling my wife today, I pass, it's interesting when I meet people like you, Angela, and I see your professionalism and Carlin and other men and women of color that I know that have become successful. And I think what happens is the rest of us fall asleep at the wheel, and we just assume that, well, she's dealt with it, he's dealt with it, they're okay. And it's, we just say, see, they did it, she can do it, and I think that's what America says sometimes. I think we just write off these experiences just because there's still success at the end. And that doesn't make it right that during the process that you have to endure that for anybody. But it always makes me, I'm always, when I meet someone my age in particular who treats me well, that is of color, and I think, I wonder how he or she got to that point where she or he can be okay with me as a white Anglo man, but yet knowing that they sometime during their life they had to have been discouraged or discriminated against, but yet they were able to, or they at least, as you say, play the game, and get through that. So, but Carlin, I can tell you are chomping at the bits to say something.
You're reading my mind. Yeah. Oh, because I hear so much of this because we major in listening to people and hearing their stories and going forward from the dialogue that takes place between divergent viewpoints. And Joe hit it when he used the word connection. The deal is and this is what the problem is in our society. If you don't have any disconfirming data, which means when something happens to you with someone of the opposite race, if you don't have some data that overwhelms that, then you immediately characterize that group by the thing that happened to you. And so what we haven't done is engage or connected, as Joe said. We haven't connected prior to those events happening in our lives. And so when that event happens in our life, whoa, man. I mean, because I mean, that's got to be the way that it is. And so often we need some disconfirming data. And so that means we almost have to be intentional about, like, in the case of Dr. Woodson's son, he's got his friends there who he understands are in as much pain as he is. And so I doubt if your son became a person who said all white people are this way, because he's got disconfirming data. He's got relationships built way before this person did that thing. And so it doesn't preclude him from being involved, but it does change the way that he views the society afterwards. And I think we've got a lot of people who don't have anything that can keep them with a proper view of society. So he probably wrote this police officer off as a bad person doing bad things. And that's often the case. And while that happens a lot along color lines, everybody needs to have those other relationships that can give them that balance, because that's kind of the way society is. As one friend always tells me, there are two types of people in America. They're good and bad, So.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Anybody else on that question?
I was just going to add that I feel like a lot of assumptions are made, similar to what Colin said, that people fill in the blanks with their idea, their narrative of who this person is. And that doesn't just happen to 6'10" Black kids. It happens to fourth graders. We pick up kids from the elementary school, and I've run into grown men walking by our mentoring organization is called Forerunner. And this grown man, every time I see him, he calls out to our boys and he says, "What's up, free riders?" And he says that every day he comes by. And some of my fourth graders got on Google to figure out what's a free rider. And they start to recognize that this person is saying, "Oh, these people are getting a handout. That's why they're going to this mentoring organization." And so they start to ask me questions of like, why does this guy say this every day? And I'm asking myself the question, when am I going to confront him? When am I going to speak up? And I found myself day after day hearing that, and I just roll up the windows or I'd shut the door and try and insulate our boys from hearing this kind of language. And eventually I decided I needed to stand outside the door right in front of him and keep eye contact on him every time he passed our van. And guess what? He did not say it. Every time I kept my eyes on him, watched him walk past, he did not have the strength to call out really just his racism. And I think that's something that I've recognized that I don't do very often. I don't insert myself in a defense. And I think that's the bare minimum. I think I could even go another degree to actually say, "Hey, you remember the last month I've seen you walk by and you said these things, and I just want to ask you, why are you saying that?" And I mean, even just from my own experience, my wife and I on our anniversary this past week, we went out to one of the protests in Dallas, and we're in the middle of the road and we hear people shouting, "No justice, no peace, no racist police." And I found myself unable to scream that with the crowd. And when we left, I was asking myself the question, why couldn't I speak up? When I'm in the middle of a crowd, no one's going to recognize my voice apart from anyone else. What is holding me back from speaking up? And I feel like saying that because I feel like that's something within the white community that needs to die. And that there's this feeling of speaking up is inserting myself into a situation that I'm not supposed to participate in. And I think that that's wrong. And I want to confess that, and I want to change, because I think these boys are my boys. That's why our mentoring organization exists, is to see every boy in our school as our own boy. And would I allow someone to speak to my child like that? No.
Yeah. My experience as a coach was always, to me, was a bridge across races. We all put the same uniform on, the same helmet, and went out and played for the same team. And it did hurt me. When we took the uniform off, and then we would walk out of the locker room at times, and there would be, some dissension or division at times. But in most cases, sport brings people together, even if it's just for the 60 minutes, But I was so naive in a lot of my viewing of it wasn't really until I moved to a Black community that the veil was removed, because I moved to Hempstead, Texas, where I was the head coach, and I was the white man. And so there was a little bit of reverse racial division there. I never saw black and white until I went to Hempstead, Texas. And I did what was interesting was on Saturdays, I did a flag football league to try to build our program. So it was kindergarten all the way up to 6th grade or 5th grade. And, well, 6th grade, because 7th grade is when football started, organized football in school. And so we would do flag football. And the younger kids would start early in the morning, and then the older kids midday and so forth. And the younger kids, oh my gosh, the probably kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, maybe 4th. I mean, they just were hanging on me. I mean, they would be, I'd have to shake them off, and but as they got older, the division, the learned behavior it didn't, and honestly, guys, it didn't matter who I was, in some cases, I was simply just the white man. And it was, I even brought some of my former players back from another district one day at practice, just so they could see that I actually had a relationship with other kids that didn't look like me. And it was almost like I was trying to prove, my acceptance and my, and my love, across. And so I have felt, it was the first time I ever walked into a room where I was a minority, where I would start thinking that, wondering if they were talking about me, or what was he doing here? I have just a tiny bit of no way would I ever compare that. But it was good for me, because even though it hurt me, it was good for me, because I think it enlarged my empathy and my compassion even broader and wider. And so we lived in Hempstead for 12 years. Now, I was only the coach and assistant principal for one, and it was that town that got me out of coaching and into administration full time. So at the time, I thought was not a good scenario. It ended up being a very good thing, or I wouldn't be sitting here right now. But in the midst of it, sometimes we don't understand the chaos or turmoil or disappointment that we go through at the time. But we lived in Hempstead, and I had an old Victorian home. My daughter went K through 8, and my son went K through 6. And the elementaries were some of the best elementaries anywhere in the state of Texas. But in the junior high and high school is when you would start having issues. And so, I took another job back in Cy-Fair, and that was it. But we loved that town, but it was such a microcosm of the world right there in that small little town. And there was even a lot of division, even amongst the different black communities in that town. And they weren't even unified, and neither were the whites. I mean, you had old redneck, long-lived landowners that had lived there all their life and didn't want education to change because it was good enough for their kids, and it was good enough for me, it was good enough for them. And then and people stayed separated in the same town. It was like it was a real education for me. So that was definitely an experience of some firsthand experience of some discrimination. So what advice would you give on taking actual steps towards some kind of, if someone was listening and they go, okay, so what are we, what is something I can do? What is a step towards racial reconciliation that you would advise?
I think we need to recognize that it's there. We have to admit that there is something there, whether it is a prejudice, whether it is a perspective, whether it is a bias, whether it's a misconception, whatever it is. I think we have to recognize what it is. And I commend Stephen on that, because he has had an aha onto what he's going to do about it, because he recognizes there's a perception, there is something that's going on with him internally that he's got to deal with. You know, I didn't raise my kids to see color. I would ask them about students in their class, like, well, tell me about how was your day? And they were like, well, Stephen, he did this, this, and this. And, you know, well, you would never get to color. You would never, ever, by the time you finally almost had to ask, well, what color is Stephen's skin? I mean, that's like the 30th question you would have to ask your kids before they would actually even say the color. I raised my kids like that. That's why they really didn't see color. But right now, our kids in the world at home are being taught to see color first. And I think that's where some of the pieces we have to start, because people are seeing color. They are not seeing personality. They are not seeing prestige. They are not seeing how nice the person is. They're not seeing whether they're a Christian or not. They're not seeing any of that. There is a perception. As soon as I introduce myself to you, it is you see Black, you see African American, you see whatever the perception that you brought with you to the table of what an African American person is supposed to look like, how they're supposed to talk, how they're supposed to walk, how they're going to react, how they're going to respond, because it is all something that is a prerequisite or something that someone has taught them to be ready for. One of the things with me, I'm 6 feet and I wear heels because I like them. And I'm always well dressed and always well manicured. Well, the perception that comes with that is, yes, I see Black, but then you bring all of these other things into what you see. And so I think one of the things that we do have to look at is, what do I bring when I see? What is it that I'm bringing? Am I bringing a perception? Am I bringing the one thing that I hear, well, I have one Black friend. Are you bringing that perception into those conversations? What are you bringing when you're having those conversations? Are those past perceptions that someone has taught you? Are those the values that you've been taught? What are we teaching each other? What are we teaching our kids at home? But what are we teaching each other at home? What type of conversations are we having? And are they bringing in perceptions of how you feel certain races act and certain races react and respond? I think that's a big piece of the puzzle too.
Hey, Angela, I would agree with that. And I would also point out, thank you for sharing your story and for a lot of insight that you've given. I think you bring up a really good point of starting at home. And so I'll speak to this, as I'm the only Asian guy in the group here. Not white, not Black. I'm somewhere, I guess, in between. But I will say that for me, I've had to start not just with my circle of influence. I would say there's a lot of people. You're only going to follow people who you believe are authentic and honest, right? And that's why I think in a lot of circles of leadership in our country today, there's a lot of difficulty following leadership because we don't see what happens behind the curtain. We don't see what happens inside a person's home, because people will quickly use their platform and not walk the walk, and they'll try to talk the talk. And so I would say, for my family, for my sphere of influence that God has given me, I started in my house. Joe, you talked about your 3 kids. And I would say there's a reality to the society we live in. It's what we would use the term systemic. And the systemic problem right now is that we need to shield our kids, shield our families from the realities of what's happening. But we have no problem talking to them about the merits of sin inside of church. We can talk to them about why murder is wrong. We can talk to them why lying is wrong. But for some reason, when we talk about racism, we want to shield our children from it. And so I would say, start with your sphere of influence. I would say that for myself and my family, it's been very helpful to have not just one conversation, but ongoing conversations
Mhm.
that lead my children. I have teenagers and little children, and I try to educate them the best way that I can. And sadly, in today's day and age, it's 3 to 4 minute long clips on of videos, through their phones. In other ways, it's using many virtual resources through Netflix, through all kinds of movies and documentaries that you can be educating yourself right now and not be afraid to affect your circle of influence.
Mhm.
I would say also, secondly, is I talk to my friends about this all the time. I live in the Woodlands. We're a predominantly white community, very affluent. And I would say here, I tell my friends every single day that you have to stay on topic. Like, if you think that by deflecting the conversation that you're trying to move the ball forward, it comes across as defense. When wrong is happening and we try to change the subject and refocus the position back onto ourselves, and we say, well, yeah, no, I mean, I've been pulled over before, or bad things happen to me all the time, it comes across as insensitive, and it comes across like we're just trying to move on to the next subject. And I will say in a very outspoken way that, I mean, I know for me, I'm done changing the subject. I'm done trying to skirt over the issue because I've experienced racism, but I'm not going to sit here and talk about my racism and for me, how I've experienced it in my life as an Asian American, because that's not the topic right now. And I believe my Black brothers and sisters have a certain level of appreciation for the fact that, hey, can we just dwell, meditate, mourn, and hurt over the fact of what's happening right now to our Black brothers and sisters versus trying to defend and trying to justify by deflecting the topic to either riots or other forms of racism, or the fact that things may never change, which is probably the worst thing we could potentially say. So that'd be my 2 cents in terms of some things that we can tangibly do and some things that I'm tangibly doing in my life that I believe affects my sphere of influence.
Oh, I'm gonna add to that, and I think there's Dr. Woodson. I want to say thank you for your input. My brother David, I deeply love you. We've been friends since high school and still to this day. And that is somebody who has had a major impact on my life, and I always appreciate David's passion for my life as a true brother. Still hanging out to the day. So we all know that color can be bypassed through love, and I want to make sure before I even start this next statement, I say it in all genuineness that I truly believe in my heart that love can conquer all things, and especially God's love. So thank you for everybody's input. Now I'm gonna add to your statement, Dr. Woodson. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think I hear your statement that we raise our kids not to see color, but I honestly, and bear with me, and it's gonna sound very opposing, but it's not. And I think we have to start raising our kids to actually see color. Because when you see color, you see the story of somebody else that doesn't, and you see the ability for, and I think that's why the ignorance exists, right? That's why you have so much kickback right now, is that they're like, well, that doesn't exist. I don't see color. But if you saw my color, you would know my story was different.
Right.
And this is not about Dr. Springer, because we all know that was like a father to me in high school. So it's not about him, but I will honestly say when I'm in my PhD currently, and I finally went to the African American Museum, I didn't realize how much history was left out of my culture. We were told 3 stories. Martin Luther King, you could pick between George Washington Carver, and you could pick between Rosa Parks. All 3 were success stories, but none of us talked about the fact that our women were raped right before they were shipped off, or they were put in the bottom of ships. And I wept after walking out of that museum because I felt like I was lied to my entire life. And because I felt like everybody was like, well, don't see color and don't see history. But if I see color and I see history, I can see change.
Right.
But if we don't see our past and we don't see color, we'll never see change. We'll never see the opportunity to progress. We'll never see the opportunity to love people past the color. But you have to see it first. You have to know my story is different. You have to know that David's story is different. You have to know that Stephen's story is different. Joe's story is different. And so is Carlin's story is different. And so is Dr. Williamson's. And if we see that and then we love past it, I'm good. But if we ignore it and don't recognize it, there's no change. Because what we'll do is just ignore the past as it never existed. And I think that is the failure right now when you see on the news. It's like, let's just ignore the past. That was 400 years ago, but we don't realize the dramatic effect it had on us today.
Mm.
And so I agree with you. And I raise my kids the same way. So I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I disagree. But I also have to now learn to educate my children who are in Cypress, Texas, who may never have a real Black History Month. And I have to educate them on a real Black History Month because they do have color. And sadly, a lot of people do see it. I just have to raise my kids not to.
Thank you, Pierre. I do agree with that concept and that process. I know that the world that we lived in when we were growing up and the way that our millennials and all of our Gen X and their experiences are a lot different than what the experiences are now. And we do have those talks. And like I said, I hate that I have to talk to my son and give him the talk. There's one commercial that comes on, and I don't know if you all have seen it or not. It is an Anglo man talking to his Anglo son about, don't forget, the cops are your friends. When you leave the house, if anything happens, call a cop. He's gonna help you. And then it flips to the other side, and there's an African American man talking to his African American son saying, okay, son, if you see a cop, put your hands on the steering wheel. You know, don't ask questions. Say yes, sir. Say no, sir. Say all of those types of things. And it shows two totally different ways that's things that are happening inside of the house. So I do agree with you, Pierre. Now, there's a lot of things that I'm going back and I'm reteaching myself as well as my kids so that they can see why some of the things that are happening right now. Then they're like, well, we didn't learn that. Like you said, well, that wasn't in history class. We had our Black History Month program. February was all about Black History Month, and you left out Harriet Tubman. But, you know, you go through those things, and when February is over, the history is supposed to stop, but at school, but it doesn't. History, and it's the old adage, if we're doomed to repeat it, if we don't know it. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Right now.
Yeah.
That's really good. I was going to say, just along those same lines, I think history is so important, particularly for the white community. I mean, just this past Friday, we invited some community leaders from our area in the northeast side of Dallas, Texas, to come share about their experience. And we had leaders come and share about schools that we're serving that they went to while they were still segregated. And if you could see the hundreds of white people listen to that story and see the school that we serve in a different light, I mean, people are shocked. We talked about a historic Black settlement that is right south of where our program is, where a Black community existed in Dallas that was dirt roads, no running water, surrounded by an affluent white community. And we drive past that every single day, but you don't think about the history of the city. You don't think about how systemic these issues are because their history is beneath our feet and we've covered it with concrete. And I think that learning the history of where you're from and how it relates back to this situation, I think is really helpful. Even just thinking about Juneteenth coming up, Texas being the last state where slaves heard about their emancipation. Like that needs to be something that white people know about and that we commemorate. So yeah, I think that's helpful.
Thank you for that.
Now, I want to make a statement kind of in support of Dr. Woodson, and not at Pierre, but because I understand what you're saying. But I think what we got to understand is that there are 340 million Americans, and everybody has a different experience. You know, I grew up in Prairie View, and so I grew up with the very Black experience, and all the things that most Black people didn't get as a youngster, I got history. We were over. I mean, by the time we were in elementary, we knew who did the first open heart surgery, a Black man. We knew who invented the stoplight, we got all this stuff as a result of our community. And so as a result of that, as I grew up and I was going to ask Jeff what years he was at Hempstead, because I went to Waller High and we used to beat you all routinely in football. But so I was going to ask him, because in that area, that part of there was so much race. And when he started talking about race incidents, I could give you one of every type. I could give you great stories of heroic white people standing up to something, and I can give you stories of Ku Klux Klan doing this thing and calling our house saying, you're going to be the next N-word we get, you know? So we got that whole spectrum. But what that did, so my experience is unique, and what I did with my daughters, and I think the impact goes for generations beyond. Once you live through these things, then we've got to take the historical narrative. We got to take the real actual history, and we've got to not just live in it, but learn from it. And I think that's kind of the thing that we got to do, because if we continue to live there, because often when I hear people say, well, this has been going on for 400 years, there's been a lot that we have not gotten rid of maybe in that time, but where there's also been a lot of change. And so we've got to learn from it, take the positive and move forward, and I do this so that my daughters, I've got 2 of them, and that their children won't have to go through these same things. And I think we've been on this circular thing, because I do think, and of course I got the foundation called Erase Racist, so I think we double down on race, which has been proven not to be a valid concept. Everybody understands that, and everybody understands when they say it's a social construct and everything like that. But what we do is we continue to live in that, and we continue to teach that as though it's really that important. And so when you tell somebody your skin color, because it makes a difference to people who had that ideology. And so people say, well, yeah, but their police officer is going to see you as black. Yeah, but that's because he's living in that color world, because the race concept has infiltrated his mind so much that he sees a person and he makes their value based on their skin color. And so how do we not then make value based on skin color? And I think we have to do away with the race concept, because the problem with any racist that has ever been has been that they place value on that person's skin color, or no value on that person's skin color. And so I don't think that, as Einstein said, I don't think you solve a problem with the same mindset that created the problem. And so, because race was created, and I made a post on Facebook yesterday where I said, we say racial equality is like saying fair injustice. You can't have a concept race that was meant to be unequal, and we continue to double down and use that. There'll just never be a way that we make that concept, which was meant to be unequal, make it equal. And it comes from that, and that's why it's so hard for us, and that's why we keep going around the loop. We've had riots in every decade, you know, and it just continues to go on, because I think we double down on this race thing, and everybody thinks that means we got to do away with our black culture and our heritage and things like that. And by the way, David, I did the DNA, the 23andMe DNA, and I'm 2% Asian, so I got some of that in me too. So you're not the only Asian guy here. But anyway, but I think it's, and that's what we, in the Erase Race, we're like, I've got, my daughter married a quote unquote white guy, and I've got a grandson, and I'm surprised he didn't come and interrupt me while I'm speaking here. But I said, it's terrible for me to tell him he's got to choose to be this or to be that. No, you're a product of both of your parents, and they both have a heritage that comes from, one maybe more European, one's maybe more African, but they need the truth of who they are, and they don't need to be put in a box and identified, but you're this because somebody else sees you as that. No, we don't need to be dictated to who we are. We are who we become via our parents. So that's just my view. But of course, I'm the guy who would start an Erase Race. So
no, I just want to make sure you know that I agree with you, because we all know that we're all made in the image of God, and we should.
That's right.
I want to make sure that is very clear in a heavenly mindset. And I wish we didn't live in a sinful mindset. I wish we didn't live in a world full of sin. And my point is, we have to be able to see what the world we live in. And although we want a heavenly approach, I have to be honest in raising my kids. That's why we have the conversation about when they get in the car, right? So I can't ignore the fact that there is race, because, no offense, we live in a sinful world. So I agree with you, and I'll make sure I make that very clear. I want that perfect world to exist, and I really do. But sadly, we don't. And I'll still raise my kids. Sorry, something's in my throat. It's not Corona. And sadly, we don't. So that's what I'm saying. I feel like I did live in a perfect world as a kid from the suburbs, And for the most part, I was accepted. I was invited to people's house, but I didn't realize till later that those backhanded slight comments, hey, you're not like the rest of them, because I was well educated and because I did not sag my pants, and my parents raised me in a Caribbean home. So I get your point. And my point is I learned how to code switch at an early age. I know how to go back and forth. I can have this conversation and then go back to my church in Acres home and have a totally different one. And I know that. But my point, I really agree with you. I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. We're all trying to seek unity, and I appreciate and applaud the ministry that what you're doing. So I want to make sure I do see it from a heavenly mindset. And I do tell my kids to love everybody the same. But although we're going to love everybody the same, we have to at least recognize that people don't always love us back. And that I can't, I'm not going to raise my kids to go through the shock value I did at 30 years old. That's kind of my point. I had to go through the shock in my PhD program, but I'd rather educate them now because they at least can know it exists in this sinful world. But then I'm challenging you to see past the sinful world and love as Christ loves us. So I agree with you, but I need to educate my kids that color does exist in order to teach them how to love past it. But I can't say there's no color. And that's the one thing I'm saying. So we are on the same page. Just want to make sure you know that. Well, I think I am. I think we are.
I wanted to go back and just reiterate something that David said that I think is so because again, we're looking at, okay, what are concrete actual steps that we advise, and I love that's tangible that we can all do in our conversations with other people, and that is not to be dismissive of what the reality is from the people that you're talking to, which may not always be your reality, but to just wash it away or just gloss it over, but to be interested and to be compassionate, and to be have an empathetic ear, and to be transformed into the fact that there are more ways than one to feel, and that we're all and I think what happens is we don't take the time to do what we're doing right now, and I think this is good. If we were having dialogue and conversation, at least we have a chance. It's when we don't have, it's when we walk away and we're intolerant and again dismissive of people's feelings and premises, is when I think that divide gets even wider. So I think that was great. I think that's all these things you guys are saying it holds so much value. So what is it? Think about this group right here. And this is it. This is going to be the last question for tonight. And so what are some of the action steps that we can do as this group, this collective group, as individuals in our lives and the paths that we cross every day, but as a group, as we have this discussion, what are things that this group could do to make a difference in some reconciliation?
Yeah, I think it's got to be like we did tonight. There's got to be some deep discussion, so that, and I hate to say it because my wife gets on me about saying, you just have to argue with everybody. It's like, but I think to get deeper, we got to get deeper, because all the surface stuff and saying the right thing so that we all get along is not real dialogue, and it doesn't promote growth. And we need to challenge each other, and we need to really be honest about what we're feeling, because I hear stuff across the news and some of it doesn't go, yeah, but that's not true, but when we have a crisis such as we have right now, people can say a lot of things based on emotion, and it'll just fly, and everybody will accept it. Yeah, and everybody will accept it, but it might not even be true, but it'll fly during a crisis. And so in a group like this, and I think in all the dialogue, because we put on these dialogue sessions and we try to create an environment where people can be very straightforward, honest, and still have the discussion. Even though there's disagreement, you can have the discussion because you've broken down all those barriers to, so that there's a sense of trust and respect in the conversation, so that you can still have that, so that we can get really deep and find out why people think the way that they do. Because when we do that with people that we care about, like in this forum, when you do that with people, when you've got a relationship, like Joe said, connected with people, if you can do that, then we can begin to reach out and begin expanding out into the rest of the society and create more enclaves where people are doing that and being honest and having real open dialogue. Because I can tell you, having in my world, which has been very integrated, especially since I joined the Marine Corps and everything, I tell people this all the time. I said, I've met so many quote unquote white people. They're scared. And I'm talking about honest Christian white people. They don't know what to say. They say something and it's like, they're not authorized to say that. And then then people are saying, why don't you speak up? You should be speaking up. Then they speak up and then it gets shut down. And I'm like, man, I said, I don't know about them, but I'd hate to be white right now. I'd hate to be white because that's got to be so difficult. So I can understand from both sides. Yeah, there's some bad stuff that they've done, whatever, but let's start dealing with individuals and let's deal truthfully and honestly with everyone.
Mm-hmm. I agree, because that's really the only way you're going to impact the change. If you pretend like it's not happening and it's not going to happen to you, or it won't happen to you, it's not real to you until it does happen to you. But we can't wait that long. You can't wait until you get the experience to make the change that needs to be made. And by having that dialogue and telling everybody in advance, I love you, I'm coming to you from a Christian heart, from a loving place, because I want to see this change. And just like Pierre was saying, he's like, I kind of, differ with you a little bit on that. That's okay. That's not a big deal, because in order to process that change, you have to hear all of the different things that have happened in people's lives to understand what impacts the choices that they make. What happens, I'm still kind of wondering, Stephen, what happened to you that won't allow you to speak? Did something happen that you are afraid, kind of like what Carlin was saying, that the repercussions from saying something or being noticed by someone, or not knowing what to do after you say something? Are you holding yourself accountable? All of those types of things. I think that's something, as number one, I think I'm hearing everybody on here is a Christian. So the way that we look at things, our values look a little bit different, but we can still have a difference of opinion, but still make change, because the ultimate goal is to impact what's happening right now and in the future. But if we don't address the perceptions or misperceptions, the conversations that we're having, the way that I feel versus the way that you feel, Joe, or the way that you feel, Stephen, if we bring all of those experiences to the table, then that's where we start. So I think this platform is a great platform to begin, but we do have to then, after we answer all of these questions, what do we do next? Mm-hmm. To make that change. We can't just have the conversation and keep it to ourselves. I know, Dr. Jeff, you were saying you could post this on another platform, the recording, and maybe help one person. And we said at church, if I can just help one person, then we can make that change. But one and one and one and one and one, how do we get to 100, 200, 300, 400, and make that big dent in it? So I think that's something, as if we continue to have this platform, I think we need to look at it and go, how are we going to do it on a bigger platform, like having focus groups, everywhere. I think it's a great time to talk to our millennials. I think it's a great time to talk to the fourth graders, because their perceptions right now, they understand, they know. And as you're watching on media, I don't know if y'all saw the little girl that was afraid that the cops were going to kill her. So, that baby has a perception already. But then I love the video where you have the little Anglo little boy and a little black boy, and they're running from the distances and they're coming together. I mean, that's powerful. What do we do to get that done? So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, it's it can be, if it can be overwhelming when even people maybe even people that are close to us have a mentality that is not in the same sphere that you would hope, maybe not as extreme or opposite end spectrum of maybe closer to the center, but still people that you think might be closer to your thoughts, but yet you see them or you hear them say things and you go, oh my God, how am I supposed to change the world when I'm not even going to be able to change, some of my closest relatives, and but yet, we know that, as you mentioned, if we are believers, we know that God's in control, and that we need to continue to focus on those things that, one of my favorite scriptures that I was going to end with today is a scripture that I would read to my seniors before they would literally walk out the door. We used to do senior walkout, and they would meet me in the cafeteria. It was on a volunteer basis. It was technically their last day of school. But a lot of them had testing the last couple of days, so they were all on different schedules. So out of about 450 seniors, you might have 150, 200 of them show up. The first year I did it, I had 13 kids show up. The last year I did it, it was almost 300, and it became a senior walkout. And I literally would stand at the door. Well, first of all, I would speak to him, and I would stand at the door, and I would hug each one of them as they walked out the door. Because I told them, I said, when you walk out this door, it's never going to be the same. You can come right back in, but when you walk out, you're a graduate. And so we want people to be changed when they walk out, when we send them out into the world. And so what I would read to them was Philippians 4:8, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. And so we have got to, as a people, we have got to continue to think about those things. And we just have to keep learning and loving, and hope and encouraging one another. And if those things happen, maybe we'll see transformation truly happen. And we cause crisis and dilemmas in people's thinking. And focus. One of my favorite movies is Patch Adams. Have you guys ever seen that movie? You need to see. Yes, Patch Adams. Go. It's an old movie. Go look it up. There's a scene in there where how he got his name, where he literally puts a patch on the whole of a styrofoam cup of a patient who's a mental patient. But the mental patient, it was brilliant. He was a mathematician, and he had gone off the deep end, and he was in this mental institution. And Patch Adams stops in one night and has this conversation with this patient, and he sees his cup on the table, and the cup is leaking, and he simply puts a piece of tape over it and stops it from leaking. And from then on, he's known as Patch. But the patient picked up Patch's hand, and he said, look at your hand. He says, how many fingers? And he says, 5. He says, no. He says, look beyond the problem. He says, see what no one else can see. And when you stare at it, it starts blurring, and it blurs, and you can actually see it. And so the answer is 10. He goes, yes. Look beyond the problem. See what no one else can see. And sometimes I think that's what we have to do. We have to really, talking about those deep conversations you guys are talking, you mentioned early, and to continue those conversations and to see what no one else can see. And, and that's the answer. So I just pray tonight. I give thanks. Guys, we've been on an hour and a half, and to me, it feels like 10 minutes. But in honor of your time, we're gonna sign off, and guys. But I'll be in communication with you all, and if you guys would, I'll be in touch, and if you're agreeable, we'll do this again. And if you have any other thoughts and format ideas, let's do it. So any final words?
No, just thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to create a powerful dialogue. Thank you for the people who are on this call. Thank you for everyone that allowed me to participate. Thank you, Dr. Springer, for leading us well, and appreciate you calling this conversation to the forefront.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for to everybody for sharing their thoughts and ideas so vulnerably, courageously, honestly, and yeah, I'm excited for you to do more of these. So I just want to say I'm honored, and I'm thankful that you included me in on the conversation.
You bet. You bet.
Joe, can you share your information in the chat?
Yeah, I will definitely do that. I'll do it right now.
Okay. Great. Thank
Hey,
you.
Jeff,
I'll
when
also
were you
say
in
thank you to
Hempstead?
everybody. Just want to say thanks for everybody else for making time as well. And sorry to have my camera on. I'm actually cooking for my family right now. I have like 5 children, so we have a whole entire starting 5.
Hey,
But yeah, I do want to say thank you to everybody. And my challenge to everybody, since we're all believers, would be that hopefully, we've all been on a mission trip, right? And I think believers sometimes have a sense of mission trip syndrome whenever things can rock our world. We can go to a place of poverty and our hearts could be turned and changed and heartbroken. And then we go right back to things being nice and comfortable where we're at. So my challenge for everyone else, a challenge for myself as well, is to not treat what's happening in our country right now like another mission trip, like another mentality here in the United States where we can just come right back to comfort. I think God has challenged all of us to a time of discomfort, and that time might be a season. We could be in the desert for a while, but a big part of that is knowing that we can't just make this a hot topic or a hot button right now. There have been way too many years worth of pain and struggle for us to skirt over it. And so again, as believers, I'd say let's not just go back to comfort. Let's not go back to complacency. Let's step out and try to do our best to change every single day.
well, let's suit up. Let's get in the game.
Yeah.
It's game day. God, every day God gives us his game day. So let's get in the game. So God love you guys. Peace be with you. I have everybody's information. So I'll send out, some, if you guys want each other's contact and things like that, and you didn't have time to get that, I can be the vehicle for that. So everybody's got my information as well. So God bless you guys. And hey, I'll send you also, if any of you have things that you think would be important for the rest of us to have, so you can send it to me and I'll send it out. And so I'd love for you guys to hear Stephen and my podcast that's coming up in a couple weeks. And some of the topics from the fringe, some of the same principles and those kind of things would through our conversation, might surface through that. And again, anything that you guys have that might add to this conversation and to fuel that this issue, to help us through this, navigate, like David said, keep it alive, send it to me. So anyway, God bless you guys. Peace be with you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.